mixed in there at some point. So hello everyone. I'm Zazubar, and this is the Demons from Outer Space, which means it's a podcast. The two guys who took the name from the German version of Godzilla vs. Megalon, and now we do a podcast every week because we wanted to. And this week we're going to talk about X-Men 2. Joining me, I have Dylan McCandless, aka Super DM64. And Dylan, this is your long-running, or we've done one, and now this is the second in a soon-to-be long-running series on the Demons from Outer Space. Would you like to exposit on that a little further?
Yes, by the way, for those listening, if there's any weird vocal things going on, I'm on the front end of a cold here. So
he's also feeling insecure about the size of his penis, so he's having some doubts.
Well, I mean, I'm used to that. But anyway,
it's creeping in, though. It's creeping in.
Fuck was I saying?
I did that deliberately to take you off track. But you were apologizing for your shit voice, which is certainly considerate. We all appreciate that. And you were also explaining
more shit than usual is the problem. If it was the normal amount of shit, then I wouldn't feel the need to apologize. But given the extra shittiness, But anyway,
the two people that listen to this show, they're used to a certain consistency, and I don't think they're getting that tonight. So you're letting those two people down, Dylan.
Oh, good.
So let's not let them down about talking about X-Men movies. Well, that's what we were also trying to explain.
Yes. So, as Bill said earlier on in the season, we started talking about X-Men movies. We're going to review them all.
That was last season, son. That cold's affecting your brain. It's fucking up your head. Yeah.
Fact. Anyway,
that was many moons ago, my friend.
So last season, then we talked about X1, and now we're going to talk about X2, and then after that, we're going to continue going in the order that they were made until we're caught up,
or until we don't feel like it anymore.
Which is going to be impossible to catch up until March, because that's when Logan comes out anyway. Which you think we should make an effort to schedule more of these in between now and then, so that when Logan comes out, we can just fucking do that episode.
Oh, that's a lot, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna do a spoiler. We'll do a spoiler analysis for that on SOS, and then we can do that. We can do an episode on it on here when we have the DVD and everything. Once it's had some time to kind of sizzle for a while, I feel that's more interesting with these as well, is that the movies that we're talking about have had some time to impact the culture and leave a certain impression on the superhero genre that it's kind of interesting to go back and look at now with the films that we have nowadays. And I feel like Logan is going to be fascinating in that regard, because it looks like a very different approach for these X-Men movies than these films took. So let's let that impact the culture, see how people feel about that, and then we can come back and talk about it on here and compare it to how we feel about these things now in 2016. And it's going to be 2017 in a couple of days, so these things could look even shittier in a couple days, Dylan. So let's bear that in mind. This is heat of the moment kind of conversation.
Indeed. All right, so we're going to be talking about X2 today, which is pretty beloved amongst fans. I think it's certainly the best of the original three movies, and I would even argue one of the best pre-MCU era superhero films. It's up there with Spider-Man 2 and shit. Because it's pretty fucking good as far as X-Men movies go. The X-Men movies are kind of on a lower standard a lot of the time than some of your other superhero fare, but this transcends that, I feel.
Yeah, so that's the thing about X2, is that it's kind of regarded as one of the best superhero movies, period. I mean, aside from all the qualifiers you mentioned earlier. It's just, if you get a bunch of people together who know the genre and you're like, oh, name some really iconic, beloved ones that stand out as really quality filmmaking as well as superhero adaptation, people would be like X2, the original Superman, Spider-Man 2 you mentioned, a whole bunch of other good superhero movies that stand the test of time as just quality films that we remember as being good. And I've only ever seen this movie once, but it still has that reputation for me. As somebody who likes and knows a lot about this genre, it definitely stuck out to me for all this time since I saw it, which was in the early 2000s when I saw it on VHS when it first came out, whenever that was, last week. Who knows? Who remember these things anymore?
I remember renting it back in the day, and then later on getting my hands on the DVD once DVD was a thing.
My grandmother bought it for me from some, I don't know, some store, where you usually buy things. And I watched it with my brother, and I was like, this is pretty tight. I remembered, very little about it, sadly. One issue I always had was that I couldn't really remember what happened in X2 and what happened in X1. Which one, what scenes happened where. I remembered the scene where Sabretooth and Wolverine fight in the snow, and sometimes I thought that happened in X2, and then the scene where Wolverine goes to Alkali Lake, I thought that happened in X1. I got kind of confused, but
yeah. Well, that one's a bit understandable because they set that up in X1.
Yeah, and they definitely lead into each other a lot, so that might have something to do with it as well. But I also do feel like, and we'll talk about this, that there's a bit of similarities in terms of structure of the story and the action sequences, and there is some kind of not to an insane degree. There's a bit of sequelitis maybe in X2 in terms of just certain scenes that worked well in the original being done again in kind of the same place. In the same vein as some people complained about, your Star Wars Episode 7s and your Jurassic Worlds, your just sequels that kind of retread elements of the first movie.
Yeah, but I would argue that unlike those films, what it borrows from X1, it just does it bigger and better. We talked a lot when we were watching. I think that's
certainly debatable. Sure.
I think when we were watching X1, we talked a lot about, or when we were reviewing X1 rather, we talked a lot about how it felt kind of prototypey. It felt like they didn't really have a lot of confidence in the property at the time because honestly, superhero movies were very hit and miss before then anyway. And so it didn't have the hugest budget in the world because they just weren't sure, if it was gonna succeed. But then it wound up being a massive success. So this time they had a lot more license to just go balls to the wall, and it really shows.
Yeah, it definitely has a much grander scale, and it doesn't feel prototypey. It just feels of the time. It definitely goes full just full on with what exactly it's trying to be, and I think it's. I think you said something to this effect earlier. It's kind of the best of these early 2000s pre-MCU Marvel movies, or one of the best. Certainly not my favorite, but it's just it does the most with what they had at the time, and does something pretty cool. There's some really great shit in this movie. I do, and I'll just say this up front, just to not bury the lead too much. It's not one of my favorites. It's not, and this is only the second time I've ever sat down and watched it all the way through. I just watched it an hour ago. So, but the impression that I had that makes sense with my previous impressions is that it's very of the early 2000s era, and there's just some slow kind of stretches in it, and it just kind of takes a while to get going, I feel, and there's too much fat around the really good, meaty, great moments, I feel. Not as much as in X1. I felt it a lot more in X1, but I still feel that that's an element of X2 as well. And I think that's just the time period, when this was made, and that's inherent with all these things. Even Spider-Man 2, which I love, it's got it just as much as this movie, probably, maybe even more. Just that, just the conventions of the era that don't hold up so well now. Would you agree with that, or do you think that this movie overcomes all of that and just it doesn't bother you at all?
It certainly feels of the time. I think I like this movie a whole lot more than you do. As far as pre-MCU stuff, as I said, it's right up there with Spider-Man 2 for me, because, what else do you really have to compare it to?
But that's the thing, though, D. This is cream of the crop of that era, because what the technology people had at the time and the understanding of what comic books could really be about and what you could do with these characters at the time. This definitely does the most with that, but a lot of the other stuff just misses so hard that it's just kind of easy to just dismiss that stuff now. like I feel like people like very much so when they retrospectively look back at this genre, cherry pick from each era of like the stuff that really got it right. You know, people go to Batman '89, Superman '78, and they, you know, you talk about these landmarks because everything else that was made around that was just people just stabbing in the dark, trying to bring these characters to life on the screen in a way that people could, that would emotionally resonate with people. And I feel like this one does a way better job of it than your Hulks. I don't know, what are some other ones at the time that missed? So this is 2003. I was looking up a little bit of it on the Wikipedia before we started this.
Just to name pre MCU Marvel shit, obviously, like the 2000s era Marvel shit. Okay, obviously you have the Spider-Man trilogy, you have the X-Men trilogy, you have Hulk, as you mentioned, you have the fucking Fantastic Four movies, which the first one was, you know, a fun movie, and the second one was just absolute dog shit. And then you have
Fantastic Four is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, though. That is very much so a movie that is super held back by the conventions of the time. The lack of willingness to go full on, as I said before, with what you can do with these characters, and just making something that people of the time like what would be popular with the general populace, and they certainly achieved that. And I look back on that movie with fondness for that reason, because I was in the general populace in 2005. I saw that movie at like fucking 11 o'clock with my friend, and we fucking loved it. But you know, we were dumb fucking, I mean, how old would I have been? Like 10, 11? We were dumb like preteens, so what the fuck did we know? We used to go in the backyard and light paper towels on fire because we thought it was cool. Like, what the fuck did we know about quality filmmaking? I liked X2 though, so I think that says something. I still like this movie quite a bit. But I think that, like Fantastic Four, like Ghost Rider is a different thing, but it has a little bit of it too.
Ghost Rider is a weird example. That's a movie that I think both of us love-hate. And it,
yeah, because X2 is definitely not love-hate. It's love and then go, I'm kind of out of this now.
Ghost Rider is this weird example where, like, it was in that pre-MCU era, and it was another one of those movies that kind of worked, but also just didn't quite hit the mark. And then they make a sequel in the post-MCU era and managed to fuck it up even worse.
That movie could have been like so much fun. And a lot of people, that's the weird thing about Spirit of Vengeance, is a lot of people like it. And its problem is definitely, maybe a little bit, its conventions of the era, but it's more so just the movie just doesn't make any sense, and it really struggles to emotionally resonate with the audience. And again, I feel like that's what a lot of superhero movies struggled with pre-Avengers, pre-Guardians, pre these just explosive hits that just took over the pop culture ether. And X-Men and a couple of other franchises have managed to do that in the past because they have a certain degree of passion and understanding of what the comics successfully managed to bring to people, that people, you know, wanted to continue to see these characters over and over again. And I think that this movie gets a lot of that right, because a lot of the characters are really cool and stand out as unique individuals on their own, even outside of the film. Like Wolverine, looking back at these early Hugh Jackman performances, you can definitely see why they were like, we've got to get this guy into his own movie. Because he's like, he elevates everybody else's performance when he's in the scene with them. Everybody else is fine, but it's instantly 10 times more interesting when they're in the same room as Wolverine. And
it's so strange. These I think we mentioned this when we reviewed the first one. It's so strange to watch these movies now too, because he's so fucking young looking. It's
his baby-facedness isn't as noticeable in this, and he's a lot more ripped in this one too. I think that he got a lot of heat for his performance in the first movie because he wasn't like super ripped, and then he bulked up a lot for X2.
Yeah, we all know that Hugh Jackman's Wolverine training regimen these days is just like ridiculous.
Yeah, well, if you hear him talk about like getting cast for fucking Van Helsing, like he mentions a lot like, oh, I was just training so hard for X2, and I was ready to do this already. I just carried my training over. Although I think he tweaked it a little bit because they didn't want him to be as ripped as he he came to them like, oh, I'm ready to play Van Helsing, and they're like, you're almost too ripped. Like you don't look normal. Like we want a guy who looks kind of normal. So
You look like a mutant, which I guess is a good thing, but not for this one.
you look like a piece of just like when you go to the store to buy like the Thanksgiving turkey and you see one that's just like perfect, like you're like it's perfectly just formed and gigantic and it's got all the right curves and everything. That's Hugh Jackman. Anyway, that's a weird analogy, but that's what came to mind.
You, sir, are a slab of concrete in human form, and we need you to be less so.
What?
Like he's just like fucking like I don't know. He's just like fucking rock solid.
Slab
you know what I mean?
of concrete. Oh, okay, that was a. See, I feel like that was a weirder analogy than my turkey analogy because I was like, he doesn't look anything like a slab of concrete. He looks like fucking.
But turkeys are fucking soft and delicious.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the shape. I get what you're saying. That like, if you try, sure, if you like tried to steamroll him, you'd probably get fucked up because he's just.
You know what? You ever see like a side of pork in a grocery store?
I can't believe we're just trying to find different physical inanimate objects to compare Hugh Jackman's muscular nature to. The dude's
Like, I don't know.
The dude's just ripped.
I don't know if this is a thing in the North, but sometimes around here you can go into a grocery store, especially like smaller grocery stores, and just find like just a fucking side of like country ham that's just been salted to like perfection, and it's just sitting there.
I've never
I'm
had
hungry.
like a good salted ham. I've got a lot of ham left over from Christmas. I should salt it up and put it on some bread and see how it goes.
I don't think you can just like sprinkle table salt onto it though. I think there's like a process or something.
Well, you know what?
You know, like,
I'm not going to let that stop me. I don't let people tell me what to do. So Babyface Hugh Jackman, not so Babyface. He was in the snow. He was out in the wild woods of Canada or wherever Alkali Lake is. So I think it makes sense that he looks a little bit older, a little more weathered. He's been out in the hardcore elements. So,
well, the first shot that we see his face in the movie, though, I don't know if it was just the lighting, but he looked really baby-faced in that shot. And then, like, the rest of the movie, he looked fine. Like, it was weird. It was like I was watching that first shot, and I thought, are you like an elf or some shit? Like,
do you think that maybe it was because you'd forgotten, like, like what Hugh Jackman looked like in this time period? Like, we've seen the Logan trailers and a whole bunch of promotional material for it since we reviewed X1. So maybe you just had to readjust to young babyface Hugh Jackman as opposed to grizzled, old, very, very, very ripped current Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, probably. That's probably why it stuck me. It's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
like,
I would feel the same way.
It's the kind of thing that I adjust to immediately.
But yeah, I think because of X1, because we watched that so recently and reviewed it, I was able to adjust to it more quickly. But again, I also think that he's not as baby-faced in this, and I think that he's more ripped helps that. But everybody, again, as I said, everybody else is fine in it. See, do you feel like Stewart, oh shit, McKellen, I can't believe I forgot his name. And, who's the guy who plays Stryker? What's his name?
Fuck, I don't know
Tony
who played
Cox or something. He played.
There are three different Stryker actors at this point, so it's kind of hard for me to keep it straight.
Well, I don't know any of their names. But I knew this one's name at one point because he was in that Doctor Who movie that was about like the making of the original Doctor Who.
He was the producer, wasn't he?
Yeah, he played whatever the hell his name was. Yeah, he played the guy who started the idea for it. Like he was in a weird way, he was sort of the creator of Doctor Who, even though there really wasn't one person. Yeah,
I didn't make that connection until just now, but yeah, that's totally him.
Oh yeah, he's in a whole bunch of stuff. He's in a couple of superhero movies. I can't remember the names of the other ones that he's in, but I know he's in other stuff. He's great, and he's also a standout cast member.
It's Brian Cox.
Brian Cox. I knew Cox was in there somewhere, as I always do. But I didn't remember Brian. He's great. He's got that great Southern drawl. I'm sure you appreciated that a lot.
Yeah, that's kind of missing with the two newer Stryker actors.
The Origins one has like a bit of it, like a little, but it's not pronounced. It's not pronounced. It's like in Fantastic 405 where you have Doctor Doom and he's got like a weird half kind of European weird accent, but it's so vague like you don't even notice it, and he just kind of sounds like a dickhead American, who just sounds really full of himself, which I guess is what that actor probably was conveying on his own. So you get that kind of you got that kind of same sense. Anyway, what I was trying to say before though was I feel like all the younger people, like all the other kids and everything, like they all kind of fall flat a bit when they're on their own. Like, how do you feel about Iceman? Sean Astmore, I think, is the actor's name.
I think he's okay. I think he's perfectly serviceable. He doesn't stand out too much to me. I think I'm a lot more.
First movie, right?
Yeah, kind of. He's not really in any of the action sequences or anything, but he's
he's not really in this either. And for the ones that he's in, he's either on the floor or he's in a plane.
Yeah, he doesn't really get to do any like action stuff until I think he does some in X3, if I remember correctly.
The only action scenes that I remember him being in are in Days of Future Past.
Well, that was very recent. But what was I saying? In the first movie, he's just at the school flirting with Rogue, and then there's a scene where Mystique impersonates him.
Yeah, that I remembered as well. But
that's probably the best scene in the first movie because he's actually playing Mystique in that character. That's another character that really carries these early X-Men movies.
Yeah, oh god, she's great in this. I think she's like 10 times better than she is in the first one, comparatively. She's awesome in this.
She has more of a personality in this movie. She has a little bit more to do.
Yeah, I mean, the brilliant move of this that they marketed a lot. You know, the subtitle of this movie was X-Men United, and that refers to Magneto and Mystique team up with what's left of the X-Men, and that's great because you put McKellen.
I love that they didn't dwell on the stereotypical like we don't trust you because you're the bad guys.
No, they don't. They don't even really address it initially. Like they're just kind of like, this is what we have to do because we all know the score and we all know that shit's fucked up. I was reading up on it before we did this, and they referred to it as the Empire Strikes Back of this franchise, and I can definitely see a lot of that in the structure of it and where the characters go and the darkness that it brings all the characters to and the moral ambiguity. I think one of the best scenes in the movie is where they're at Iceman's parents' house, and man, my cat's driving me crazy. Anyway, so sorry guys, he's meowing a lot at the door. They're at Iceman's parents' house, and the cops are coming in, and Pyro just starts lighting up all the cop cars. They just start blowing up and everything, and clearly cops must have died in that. Like, they don't show any bodies or anything, and they never say that people died, but people must have died. Like, he's blowing up cars. Like, sure, Storm puts out the fire, and Iceman puts out the fire. No, Rogue puts out the fire, which was actually really good to see her do something other than just feel sorry for herself, because in the comics and in the cartoons, Rogue is like she has this spunky self-confidence, and she's just a really fun character, and she struggles to be that in these movies because she's just always feeling so sorry for herself. And this is so much of that. But there's that one scene where she steals Pyro's powers so that way she can stop him from killing all the cops and put out the fire herself. It's really great. But again, just my point being that I don't exactly remember what my point was. We've covered a lot of ground already. We've jumped to a lot of different places. Do you remember what exactly I was trying to say? If not, it's okay. I'm sure you have another place you can take us anyway.
Not entirely, but since you mentioned that cop scene, I did want to say that as far as young cast members, I do actually, one thing I do like as far as the younger people in this movie is I do like Pyro's sort of subplot in this movie.
Yeah, he's great. That's what I was talking about, though, was the younger actors compared to the older ones. But yeah, go ahead. I love him, too.
Yeah, we get to see a little bit of a supervillain origin in this movie, which I don't think anybody was expecting, and it fits very nicely, I think.
And it's subtle. It's subtle, like you said. Like it's not like he's just the whole movie going, I'm evil, and I'm going to turn on you guys. Like he pals around very well with Iceman and Rogue. And I mean, sure, every scene that he's in, like something he does do something that kind of indicates that he's going to go on the wrong path. But it's all really natural, and I feel like his motivation makes sense. Like when he uses his powers to fuck with those guys who are fucking around with them. Like, I just think that that's realistic. Like, if you had those abilities, you would do that. And sure, they're in this school that's taught them to be like, no, you have to respect the fact that other people are afraid of you because they have genuine reason to be, given what you could do to them. And so you can't do stuff like that. That kind of responsibility thing that you get in a lot of superhero movies. But it's different in this because it's more of like you're hiding that you have like a certain religion or a certain sexuality that people don't approve of because it scares them for some reason. I think it's played very well in this movie, even better than the first one, because I just feel like they do more creative stuff with it. And I feel like the teen angst stuff is done better in this movie than in the first one.
Well, one of the best moments in the movie, in terms of just like character exchanges, is him talking to Magneto on the plane when they're headed to Alkali Lake. And sort of Magneto very knowingly knowing what he's doing, he's sort of playing a bit of a Palpatine role in that scene, because you can clearly tell that this kid is leaning more towards his side of the mutant issue, and he sort of manipulates him a little bit. But it's a nice little exchange. It's one of the best just like character to character moments in the movie, I think.
It's a good moment where they remind you that he's helping out and he's palling around with all the X-Men, but he still has this very extremist point of view and this very supremacist point of view. So it's a good scene for that reason as well. And like you said, there's a lot. They're very subtle about the fact that they don't trust each other, and that Magneto does definitely have duplicitous motivations while helping them, and that they shouldn't trust him. But it's this casual kind of like, yeah, we all know that though. And Magneto kind of deflects that off as like, well, yeah, that's what I'm about. I wear a red helmet so people can't read my mind because you don't want to know what's on my mind. So, but I will help you though. And I thought that was just played very well. Since we were talking about Mystique though, two things. One, watching this movie, you can definitely see why they cast Jennifer Lawrence as the young version of her. Like, looking at her...
She does look a little bit like, is it Rebecca Romijn?
Yeah, Rebecca Romijn, I believe is the actress's name.
She does look a bit like her, especially the scene where she flirts with that guy in the bar. Like, I had to do a double take for a second. I was like, that kind of looks like Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good call. But just in the makeup, like... remember, I didn't see X-Men Apocalypse, but I remember seeing X-Men Days of Future Past, and I remember what she looked like in the makeup, and she looks exactly like that in this movie. Just older, a little. But you can't even really tell that she's older. She looks the same. Her voice sounds similar, and the performance is very consistent, so that's just a testament to oh, Jesus, what's her... Jessica Lawrence.
Yeah, and that's good because one of the things about Mystique's character is that, similar to Wolverine, she has like an extended lifespan and she ages really slowly. So
I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
I was happy when I saw First Class to see that they found an actress who sort of looked enough like Rebecca Romijn to make it work.
How do you feel about Rogue
in this movie?
Yeah.
To be honest, other than the scene where she stops the fire, she's pretty much only in this movie because she was in the first one.
Yeah, and she was prominent in the first one as like an introduction to this world.
I do like the moment on the plane when Magneto and Mystique are taunting her about her hair.
Yeah, that was a good sassy little moment. And that's the one thing I love about Ian McKellen as Magneto, is he's just so sassy. He's always just like, fuck you. He's always just giving these sarcastic comments, reminding people how much of a fuck up they are, and I always love that.
I don't know why Bryan Singer feels the need to keep giving origin stories to people's hairstyles in these X-Men movies, but if you're gonna address it later, that's good.
Oh sure, that was awesome. I forgot to mention one other thing about Mystique. I really didn't understand or like the scene where she tried to seduce Wolverine. There was one really funny moment at the end of it where So she turns into Jean Grey right after Logan has this moment where he tries to seduce her, and she passes and she rejects him. So he's feeling all sorry for himself in his tent. So Mystique turns into Jean Grey, comes in and tries to seduce him, and he realizes this. And I love this because he lifts up her shirt and sees the scar that he left her when he stabbed her in the first movie.
Yeah,
when they fought as when she duplicated him and they fought. I thought that was a great bit of continuity.
Yeah.
And
it's so nice to see X-Men movies having good continuity with each other.
It's a rare...
Nowadays, movie to movie, you're like, did you forget what you did like 2 years ago?
It's a rare treat. It's a rare treat. And then she turns into a whole bunch of different women. Like she turns into Rogue, which I thought was like, oh, that's fucked up. She turns into Storm. She turns into Lady Deathstrike, I think, for some reason. Who I don't even think Logan had met at that point. Maybe I don't remember.
Mystique had her face kind of already memorized because she impersonated it early on in the films.
Right. And then Logan like pushes her away and implying like, fuck off, I do not want to fuck you, regardless of what face you have. So then she's like, I know who you really want. And then she turns into Stryker, and I was like, oh my god, that's a great moment. And I mean, of course, it's not Logan doesn't want to fuck Stryker, at least not in that way, but it's that he wants answers from Stryker, and he wants to find out about his past because he knows that Stryker knows. So, which he finds out a little bit about. And I was actually surprised how much this does actually line up with Origins. In terms of vaguely, like the vague references that Stryker makes to Wolverine having worked for him and what we see of the Weapon X program, it lines up all right with X-Men Origins, except everything at the end. Like that stuff really is nonsense. Like with how Logan actually lost his memories, but I was surprised to see that line up as well with what I remember of that movie, which we'll inevitably have to talk about on here.
Yeah. What was I about to say?
Well, I was just wrapping up on Mystique. I thought that was a cool scene.
Yeah.
Although I was asking you I thought that part was cool, but I didn't really I didn't really understand the whole scene though. So why did Mystique want to fuck Wolverine? That's my question. Like, what was the point of that? Did she? Was she just trying to fuck
animal magnetism?
I guess. That's a different Marvel movie. They could be in the same universe though. We don't know.
Well, Mystique is a very sexual being. I mean, she does a bit of sleeping around in the comics, you know. She's secretly Nightcrawler's mother and shit. So, I mean...
Do you think that's the case here?
Yeah, I think it... In this movie specifically. Do I think she's secretly Nightcrawler's mother? I mean, they don't really address it at all, but...
No, which I think is interesting. But although they have a moment together where you're like, wait, what? Where he says something to her and she's just like, well, I'm blue and you're blue, and then she walks off. Something like that.
I don't think that was exactly the dialogue, but I know the moment.
There's a lot of blue weirdos in the X-Men universe, I feel. Apocalypse is kind of blue. Beast is blue. Mr. Sinister's blue. It's just a bunch of blue weirdos.
Mr. Sinister's not... His skin isn't blue.
It's like a white, though, that it might as well be blue compared to the blue armor. Anyway, that's not my point. Why did Mystique want to fuck Wolverine? Just to mess with his head? Like, just because she was like, oh, I'll give him what he wants, even though it's not really what he wants. Like, is it like this? Is it supposed to be like the scene in Blade Runner where Harrison Ford fucks the replicant even though he knows he shouldn't? Did that happen in Blade Runner, or is that just the book?
No, he fucks the replicant.
Okay, cool. Because that happens in the book, and I haven't seen the movie in a long, long time, so I don't know if that happened in that too.
I thought it was because Wolverine, because there's that line when he finds the scar where she says nobody's ever left a scar quite like you did. I thought it was because he kicked her ass in the first movie, and she thought it was kind of hot, you know.
Oh, maybe she wanted revenge.
Well, Mystique's, you know, she's a warrior, so like that shit is just.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know if she's like the character that's just gonna fuck in the middle of like they all think they're gonna die. Like they have a pretty, like, her and Magneto know what Stryker's planning at that point. Like, they know that he's trying to wipe out all mutants, and he might do it given what he's got. So I don't know if that. I don't think that knowing her as well as we do now, especially with the prequels we've gotten, I don't think that she's that character just to fuck in the middle of that situation. Although maybe she is. Maybe I don't know this character. As the point of this series is that I don't really know X-Men that well, and you do. So maybe that is her.
Well, the Jennifer Lawrence mystique is sort of its own animal, is the thing, and so is the Rebecca Romijn mystique. So it's kind of weird. They are supposed to be the same character, but at the same time, just like writing between these movies isn't always the most consistent. So you get like these weird
Certainly.
character differences from movie to movie. Um, but I thought it fell in line with the version of Mystique that Rebecca Romijn was portraying. Um,
Yeah, there is a lot of seduction going on. I mean, there's that scene
it's
where
all
she...
about her mystique. You know, she's very
Sure.
mysterious and
And I feel
and
like I bought that the most in this one, where I was like, she definitely comes off as like somebody with a lot of depth, and not just playing it off that way because she's a spy, and that's what she would have to do to be good at her job. Like when you're a spy, you want to, kind of deflect that kind of like, I know a lot of shit, to give yourself an air of power and authority. Anyway, I also feel like the effects were a lot better in this one, especially on her. Like the transformation effects were incredible. There's that one where I don't remember oh, okay, so she grabs that hypodermic needle filled with metal that she's gonna inject into that dude that she's seduced. And as she's picking up the hypodermic needle and she says the line, bottoms up, she turns, like, she transforms back into her blue form, like, mid-turn, and I thought that was really cool. Because that's hard to pull off. Like, usually you would have her stand still, have the effect happen, and then she goes back into motion. But no, there was a lot of mid-action, keyframing in this, where they had her moving and doing something while she transformed, and it looked really cool. And shows that the effects have advanced.
they also played around a lot more with her ability to mimic voices. Um, in this movie, like when during the exchange with Nightcrawler, he's like, "They say that you can replicate anyone, even their voice," and she responds in his voice.
Yeah, that was clever. I like that too.
That was a good moment. She does like T1000 things where she'll be on the phone like in her normal form, but talking with somebody else's voice, which is creepy as hell.
This movie definitely feels like we're around the same era as Terminator 3. I think it's the same year. And I think that's part of my, like, I don't want to say repulsion to it, but kind of where I get a little, I turn myself a little off to it because I remember this era, and I remember watching these movies as a kid, and I remember being, bored by certain parts because of the limitations of the time. Like, do you remember being a kid and watching movies and like superhero stuff of the time and being a little frustrated by the limitations of what they could do and wanting them to just take some of the really cool shit from the comics that they just wouldn't do at the time because they didn't think they could do it realistically.
It depended on the movie. I had that a bit with like Fantastic Four. I didn't have that much with the Spider-Man movies because I think they really nailed Spider-Man.
I definitely had that with Spider-Man. Maybe especially 3. Like especially what they did with Venom. I was like, man, you could have done some cool shit with that, and you really fucked it up.
Yeah, well, Spider-Man 3 is just garbage, but you look at the first two movies, and I think they nailed pretty much everything. I mean, that train sequence in the second one, where Spider-Man's fighting Doc Ock.
Yeah, that is a dope-ass action sequence. We gotta do those movies at some point on this, too.
That scene was just fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think the equivalent to that in this is maybe the White House scene, where a Nightcrawler teleports through the White House and just knocks all those dudes out. I don't know how I feel about the teleporting effect, though. Because it's very early 2000s, like just kind of vague, smoky, black, electric nonsense. There's a lot of that in this movie, and I got a little sick of it. And I think that it's lazy early 2000s CGI. And I mean, it looks fine, but you can tell it's CG.
But it matches the comics. I mean, it matches what his teleportation is supposed to look like. He's like, he has like this sort of.
Isn't it supposed to be more red?
I think it differs, but usually, it's like a puff of smoke, kind of, sort of a.
Sure.
He's got this devil.
It doesn't look, but it doesn't look like smoke. It looks like a weird, like, cloud of It doesn't look like smoke to me. It looks like a weird dimensional rift, and then it closes, and it doesn't look like it's interacting with the real world around it. Like if it was smoke, you'd kind of want it to settle over things and simmer around. And again, I think that's the limitations of the early 2000s CGI. But I think that there could have been a way to make it look better. Like film some real smoke and use that as a foundation to do the effect. And
when we get around to First Class and Apocalypse, I think you'll see them pulling off the same thing a lot better, just because of the advancements of the CG.
But despite that, the action sequence is still cool because what they're doing with the teleportation idea is fucking awesome. And Singer shoots it really well. It's shot really. This whole movie is shot beautifully, really well.
Because at the top of this review, you said something that I was like, really? Where you said that you felt like it took a while to get going, and I don't know if I can see that because this movie opens with like one of the greatest action scenes in like all of like not even just superhero movies, but like action movies of the time. Like
it didn't strike me that hard. I liked it. I didn't like it that much, but in terms of the characters to get where they have to be, to find out what's going on, I feel like it took a long time to get there, and I feel like there was a lot of lingering too much on certain. Like the movie, I feel like it takes a long time to kind of develop everything and get us all on the same page for what's going on. And I feel like you could tighten that up. I feel like you could get us to to the mansion raid a lot quicker, and I don't know. I feel like there's just a lot of fat in between those really cool scenes. Like, yes, the White House scene is cool, but did it have to take that long to get to the martial arts and everything? Like, it's a long scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's a lot of that. I feel like there's a lot of lingering around, maybe unnecessarily around the big cool scenes. Because the mansion raid is also awesome. Like, just really powerful, impactful moment.
But you gotta remember, at the time that this movie came out, nobody had seen superpowers on the big screen sort of portrayed as well as that initial Nightcrawler scene was. Like,
and that's what I'm saying. I feel like I look back on this now, and I'm less forgiving of that because I saw these movies when I was a kid. Like, it's weird. Like, when I go back to stuff that I didn't see as a kid, or stuff that I didn't like grow up and see in theaters and didn't come out when I was alive, like the Superman movie from the 70s, I'm a lot more forgiving of the effects and the conventions of the era. But for stuff like this, I was around when this came out, and I remember what it was like to live in this era. So I feel like I'm less forgiving of it because I'm more cynical of it. You're absolutely right. And at the time, I feel like the fat that I'm talking about would be way less of an issue because you're right, people hadn't seen as much stuff like this as we see now. So they would have been more willing to sit there and linger and see all this stuff. We watch it now and it's like, well, we know what this is all about. We've seen all these tricks before, but for the time, they are definitely done very, very well. I just feel like they could have been done better to be more timeless, I feel like there is certainly something to be said for standing the test of time. And I feel like Bryan Singer's X-Men movies, compared to a lot of other superhero movies, don't do that as well. I feel like they don't age as well as, like, say, your Spider-Man movies or your Christopher Nolan Batman movies. Or, I don't know, what's another... Or even your 90s Batman movies. Like, I feel like his movies just they're way more affected by my remembering what it was like to live in that time period and the conventions of that era. But I don't know. That's just a personal thing.
I have the opposite thing where because I was alive at that time, it's easier for me to connect with the fact that this is just what shit looked like at the time. So it therefore it becomes easier for me to be like, yeah, okay, like I remember what it was like. I'm one of these damn kids today with their Thor Ragnaroks and their fucking Guardians. Like I remember what it was like.
With their quality entertainment, with bigger effects and adapting some more high scale stuff from the comics. Yeah, fuck those kids.
I remember what it was like to wait like 5 years in between superhero movies, knowing that they're probably going to be shit anyway. Like,
I remember the good old days. Well, you're the X-Men fan here. Why don't you tell me how this stacks up as an adaptation? What do they take from the comics in this movie as opposed to the first one? How does the build work? Tell me. Enlighten me, because I have no idea.
I'm not sure if this particular story of the villain trying to use Cerebro to kill all the mutants. I'm not sure if that's directly taken from the comics. It's strange with earlier superhero movies because they don't always take plot lines from the comics like they try to do with your more recent superhero movies. A lot of times they just take the previously established character and then make up a plot to drop them in. But the stuff
I feel like they take iconography from certain storylines and then work it into an original story, which I feel like that's what we do now still. Like, you can't straight up adapt comics, especially with characters like this that were serialized at the time, and just straight up adapt them, because it doesn't work. So you have to just kind of take the iconic bits and pieces and make something new out of it.
Honestly, I would rather have them like tell an original story than try to do what like BVS does, where it's like, hey, here's a few stories that people liked in the comics, let's smash them all together.
Well, I'm fine with taking elements of those iconic stories and then making something new out of it. Like, that's what Dark Knight did. Dark Knight's got a bit of Long Halloween in it. It's got a bit of Year One in it. It's got a little bit of a whole bunch of different storylines that are melded together into something new. And I think that's how you make a good superhero movie. And a good adaptation of these characters is you take their iconic storylines and you mash them together into a concentrated dose of what people love about them. And again, I feel like there's a really good amount of that in this. The themes of X-Men are so well handled in this. The themes of, fear of what we don't understand, and anger towards people who don't understand us, and persecution, and responsibility, and all that. It's done really well.
Yeah, well, but the stuff that I know definitely they're borrowing from the comics on is, the stuff involving Wolverine's origins, which I like the way it's handled in this movie, because they don't like go out and show you his origins. That's not what this movie's for. It's what Origins is for. But it's sort of kept sort of vague and mysterious, and it's like flashes of memories and shit like that, which is pretty much in line with what you would want.
It's creepy. It's creepy too. Like that shot where he runs out of the hallway and his hands are just dripping blood and he's got the claws out. Like and he's screaming. Like that's a great, really kind of horrifying image.
Yeah. And also the beginnings of the Phoenix Saga in this movie showing up a little bit. There are some moments when Jean's using her powers. Well, they addressed that ever since the Liberty Island incident in the first movie. Her powers have sort of been peaking a bit more. She's become more powerful. There are moments in this movie where when she's using her powers, you see like flames appear in her eyes. At the end, when she sacrifices herself to save the other X-Men, like she's sort of like there's fire around her. So it's the beginnings of the whole Phoenix thing going on. And while it's not exactly what happened in the comics, because in the comics it involved like space and shit, the basic idea of Jean Grey sacrificing herself to save everybody else and then surviving the incident because she's like wrapped in like a psychic cocoon and shit, that's all from the comics. It's just done in a different way because they weren't going to do the whole space shit on their second movie. I'm sort of sad that Bryan Singer never got to realize his vision of what the Phoenix movie was going to be, because he's not the director on the third one, obviously. No. And it's clear that he had plans. It's clear that he had big plans for it in this movie. He was setting it up so well, and he never got to do it because they replaced him in the third movie, or I don't know what the deal was. I don't know if it was their decision or if he left for some other reason. But point being, he didn't get to direct the third one, never really get to present his version of the Phoenix story, and then now he's trying to shoehorn it into the newer films. He sort of tacked it on at the end of Apocalypse, and it doesn't work anymore because he hasn't earned it the way he did the first time around. So it's kind of sad.
He hasn't earned it. He just hasn't put enough blood and sweat into it, man.
Yeah, well, yeah, you know what I mean. In this version, he had two movies to sort of set it up a little bit. In Apocalypse, he was just like, "I'm going to do my Phoenix shit, damn it," and he just sort of tacked it on to the end, so it doesn't quite work. So I'm kind of sad that we never got to see his version of what X3 would have been. Based on X2, I think it would have been better than what we got.
He's like an older dad. Like he's like, "I'm going to set the train set up on Christmas," and it's like, "Oh, Dad, it's just going to be in the way. It's just going to be a hassle. There's no real benefit to that whatsoever. Don't do it." It's like, no, it's a tradition, I'm gonna do it. And then he just fucking like breaks his hip like doing it and shit. Like he doesn't even get to set it up, and the train fucking breaks, and the poisonous smoke mix that you use to have smoke come out of the train just like kills the cat or whatever. It's just a mess, I feel like that's an apt metaphor for Brett Ratner and X-Men 3.
Yeah. but yeah. So those are the
Although
things
you were
that I
talking
know.
about Bryan Singer with the newer X-Men movies, right? That's what we were talking about.
What I was saying was he didn't really get to do his Phoenix thing in
Mm.
X3 like he originally wanted to, even though he had spent the time setting it
Right,
up
so
in the first.
he tried to do it in the newer ones, and it didn't really work. He didn't earn it, so that's why he's like the dad with the train set.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So that's a bit sad. I wish I could go visit the alternate universe where he got to make his X3 and see if it's any better. Based on these first two movies, I think it definitely would be better, and maybe it would have set the franchise on a better path. But whatever.
I don't know. It would definitely be interesting to see how this franchise would have progressed if people would have liked X3. You know, if Singer would have made it, and it would have emotionally resonated with people on the same level that the first two did. It's interesting.
Well, if
And then it would have
Singer
been
had,
just as interesting if Superman Returns had emotionally resonated with people on the same level as these first two X-Men movies did.
yeah, and I'm not a Superman Returns hater. I enjoy that movie.
I am.
But
That is a movie that very much so suffers because of the conventions and the fears of the era. We're talking about the themes of X-Men being a fear of what people don't understand. People feared what they didn't understand, what you could do with Superman in a movie, except have him mope around and fucking have illegitimate children with Lois Lane who wouldn't even remember fucking him. That's an interesting conversation. So when did you fuck me without my knowledge, Superman? It was it was back in the 80s. It was cool back.
yeah,
It was cool back then to fuck somebody and then erase their memory of it.
I wonder what the franchise had looked like if Bryan Singer could have stayed on back when he was sort of in his prime or whatever.
Thank God he didn't put any magic kisses at the end of his movie or of his superhero movies.
Yeah.
He did put some crap CGI in though. I was gonna say this before. The fire effects in this are really bad. Ooh. Like the pyro fire effect, like the scene is cool, and when the cars blow up, it's practical, so it's fine. But man, the CGI fire when he manipulates it, it looks like what we saw in that South Park episode we watched last week, like real shit.
You got to remember, CG Fire only recently got good. Like apparently that was just a hard thing to pull off. I mean, you look back at Independence Day, and everybody's like, "That model works great," and I'm like, "Yeah, but God, that fire."
Oh yeah, the CGI fire and that's god awful as well. Yeah, we definitely had a long way to go with that.
Or to go to a more recent example, since you already mentioned it, the fire in Superman Returns is is really bad.
The CGI models that movie was ballsy enough even to use CGI models of people. Like there's a CGI Brandon Routh that flies right up to the camera at one point, and you're like, why would you do that? Like, why wouldn't you just put the dude on wires? Like, it looks so bad. There's a lot of really questionable CG in this. The Matrix,
Nowadays, they can just use CG to resurrect Christopher Reeve and have him fight a young Michael Keaton. That's the movie I want, damn it.
Yeah, I would love that. Wow, that'd be so cool. Because I would totally buy that Christopher Reeve Superman would fight the Michael Keaton version of Batman.
Give me BVS 89. That's what I want.
I mean, Michael Keaton Batman would stand no chance, but that's beside the point.
And if you give me BVS 89, fucking let Billy D. Williams be Two-Face finally, damn it.
He's gonna be Two-Face. You know he's gonna be Two-Face in the Lego Batman movie, right?
Yeah, I know.
Isn't that great? That's awesome.
Good for him. He was robbed. Damn it. But
he was robbed.
X2. We were talking about X2.
Yeah, we were kind of reviewing that. So the CGI is real bad a lot of the time. You would agree.
Sure.
Oh, you know what other scene they should have fucking cut? The plane scene where the jets try to take down the Blackbird. I hated that scene. The CG was real sketchy. I didn't buy that they would get out of that. I like that Magneto saves them, but I feel like it could have been something else. I didn't think you needed that. I did find it interesting that they would have to finally address, like, if they're flying this big jet around, somebody's gonna notice. Like people monitor airspace so crazy, like especially post 9/11. Like there's no way that they'll be able to get away with that.
Well, also like the government noticed, hey, they've got a jet under the basketball court. Like
that was a cool scene where Stryker goes to the president and is like, yeah, they've got a jet that comes out. And I love how that's his evidence for, like, this is a fucked up situation they got going on. It's a mutant terrorist cell training school, and it's because they got a jet. That was good. And there was a lot of really good moral ambiguity between the mutants and the humans in this movie. There's a scene where Nightcrawler and Storm are talking about their anger for humanity, and Nightcrawler says he doesn't really care that people were scared of him anymore. He pities them more than anything else that they feel that way. And Storm just says that she's angry, and her anger helps her survive. And I thought that was a good carryover from the last movie, where she totally lost her faith in humanity at one point. And she talks about that with Senator Kelly.
I also like that Stryker is very much aware that, unlike the first X-Men movie, this is taking place in a very recent post-9/11 world, and so part of his evil scheme involves engineering mutant terrorism as a way to make the government allow him to do whatever the fuck he wants. Like that.
Yes.
That was.
And man,
and it's cliched as fuck. It's cliched as fuck now, but in 2003, that's kind of a new idea.
Yeah, it is definitely a bit cliche now. I like that the mind control doesn't have it has a consequence, though. Like, when they reveal that they're sucking the juice out of his fucking son's spine to control people's minds, like, that is dark shit. And I think that it works really well. Like, when you see him and he's got two different colored eyes, he's got the giant scar on the side of his head like he's been lobotomized. He's got something sucking stuff out of his spine. Like, it's a creepy moment. And there's just that really powerful moment where Xavier just goes, "William, this is your son," and he's like, "My son died." It's good shit. Oh, we haven't really mentioned. There's a moment
early in the film, though, where Patrick Stewart, and you're not even sure if he's joking or not, because he's got that sort of deadpan delivery. And Xavier in the comics, he's been known to do some questionable shit from time to time. So it's totally believable.
A lot of people think of him as like one of the worst fucking individuals in the Marvel universe, just like a horrible human being.
Like you look at him and he's Patrick Stewart, and you think, oh, it's fucking Picard, but he's not Picard at all.
No.
But anyway, what was I saying? Shit. But there's a moment early in the film where you don't even know if he's joking or not, because it's Patrick Stewart's deadpan delivery where he tells Logan, like, he threatens him with, like, "I'll make you think you're a 6-year-old girl for the rest of your life." And, like, at the moment it's like, oh, it's a funny line. But then later on in the movie, the bad guy's son, who we know used to be a student of Charles Xavier, in his illusion appears as, like, a little girl. And I'm like, wait a minute. Did Xavier make him think he's a little girl?
Yeah, that was interesting. I didn't know what to make of that initially. There is some offhanded editing in this, I feel, and again, I think that's a convention of the time, where they'll have somebody have a conversation, and then like quickly cuts to like 8 different angles to disorientate the audience and disorientate the character, and show that they're having like some kind of mental strife, and then they'll have some kind of hallucination, and it's just it's way too much, and it gets confusing. And I thought that. I like how they cut back and forth between, like, this is the illusion, this is real life, and sometimes they'll have like the CG like change the scene. Right after a Mystique scene, though, and I thought that Mystique had impersonated Xavier and gone back to the mansion, but that's not what happens at all.
I think the best example of it is at the end of the movie, when we know that Xavier and I forget his name, are in the fake Cerebro, or not the fake Cerebro, but the secondary Cerebro, the one that's Stryker Cerebro. We know that in reality they're in there, but in the illusion that Patrick Stewart is seeing, they're at his mansion, and it's a little girl. And
once I finally understood that, I dug that. That was clever.
But then fucking Nightcrawler and Storm burst into the room, and suddenly it doesn't look like there's anybody in there except for the little girl. So you've got like 2 different illusions going on at once, and it's weird. It's like Inception. Like like you have to put it together in your brain.
Definitely. It's very Inception-y, pre-Inception.
And then she uses her blizzard powers, and even though you can't see Patrick Stewart, you know that he's really there, so it like affects him and
right, because Stryker's son is like mentally affecting Nightcrawler and Storm, so that way they can't see them, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay. That was a good scene.
I remember being confused by all that shit when I was a kid watching this movie.
I don't even remember how I felt about it when I was a kid. I probably wasn't even really paying attention. I was like, there's lots of pretty colors, so cool. I'm happy.
but it definitely doesn't confuse me now. Maybe it's because this kind of shit happens in X-Men a lot. There's all kinds of like mental fucking around and like astral planes and psychic realms and shit. I think it's actually one thing that X-Men Apocalypse actually did a little bit better is that there's a moment when Apocalypse and Xavier are having like a battle inside Xavier's
A
brain.
mind battle.
Yeah, and it's a lot more clear what's going on in that one than in this movie. But I think, but that movie is, I think it's an editing thing.
Yeah, again, questionable editing. I feel in this. I feel like it's part of the it's part of the feeling that there's a lot of fat around the cool scenes because there's just there's a feeling in a lot of early 2000s movies, and I feel like this movie has it too, where you're just like some people exchange some awkward dialogue that makes it seem like there's some tension between them. There's some weird cuts. Somebody has a hallucination, and then they walk away from each other. And then it rinse and repeat until the movie ends and somebody has a big realization about life and about their past. That's what a movie in the early 2000s is, and I feel like this fits perfectly into that mold. And I feel like that's part of why I don't love this kind of stuff when I go back and watch it now. But again, this cream of the crop with all that. Nightcrawler, because we're an hour in, so I feel like we should kind of start to start wrapping up on what we didn't mention already. Nightcrawler, I feel, is really cool. We mentioned the cool action scene at the beginning, but he's mind controlled at that point. So he's
another character. He's another character that really kind of elevates this movie. I fucking love Alan Cummings' Nightcrawler. I thought it was a huge missed opportunity that they didn't utilize him in X3.
See, I really like him, but I wonder if when we see him in the church initially and he's hiding from Jean Grey and Storm, he seems like he's like, oh, fucking leave me alone, I don't want to be around people, rah! And he's all filled with guilt and everything. That goes away so quickly, and he just becomes like goofy German dude, like just in 2 seconds at the turn of a hat. I felt like that kind of bugged me. I don't know.
I think it's once he realizes that they're mutants, because he sees Jean Grey and Halle Berry come into the church. He doesn't have any idea that they're mutants at that point because they look normal. They haven't used their powers yet.
That didn't strike me as something that would make it okay with him because it seemed like at that point he was like, everybody's trying to exploit me. So I don't know why he wouldn't think the same thing of them. Whatever though, it's not really a big deal.
You gotta understand that Nightcrawler's always had this sort of Frankenstein's monster type thing, where like he just has a long history.
Yeah, he's very Frankenstein's monster, and I love that.
Where he just has this long history of being mistreated by humans, and he's like a circus freak show for a while. And
I did love that the drawing on the wall of the circus poster with him. It looked like the comic book Nightcrawler. I thought that was cool. There were some good references in this. You saw Hank McCoy on the TV at one point, and it was totally not Kelsey Grammer.
I don't remember exactly. I have to take another look at the shot to tell for sure. But I think it might have actually been a panel from one of the comics, just turned into a fucking fake circus poster.
No, it was very close up. Maybe it was like just a headshot, though. It wasn't like it was him doing something. It was just his head. Maybe though. But he was fun. He had some funny lines. I loved how he was always like, "My name is Kurt," whatever the hell his name is, because his accent is unintelligible. But in the circus, I was called Nightcrawler. He keeps introducing himself as that. And I thought that was great. There were some really funny moments in this overall. Hugh Jackman had some good lines. I like that he didn't even care that Nightcrawler had a name. Like he was like, "I'm Kurt Vonnegut," and I'm not. His name is not Kurt Vonnegut. That's an author.
Kurt Wagner.
Kurt Wagner in the circus, and he's like, "I don't care."
In the Munich circus, I was known as the Incredible Nightcrawler.
Yeah, that was great. But yeah, I don't know, man. I thought there were some really funny lines in this. Everybody got some funny bits. But what else? What else do you want to kind of mention?
Okay, so what have we talked about? We talked about Mystique. We talked about Nightcrawler.
I'll throw out one last thing, and then we can wrap up on you. Cyclops and Professor X always seem to get the shaft in these movies, right? So in this one, they both get mind control early on. I feel like Professor X gets much more of a go because we have those scenes where he's having discussions with Stryker, and he's also just staring at Stryker's son, and he has the hallucination with the little girl.
Well, I think Professor X at least has like one moment in this movie that outshines anything that Cyclops gets to do, in that he has that awesome
Definitely.
scene. He has that awesome scene near the beginning where he freezes everybody in that mall.
He does that twice. I mean, the scene at the end is even cooler, where he freezes everybody in the White House.
Yeah. I forgot about that one. Yeah. Professor X is one of those characters, you know. You can't use him too much because he's way too powerful to use too much. You know, he's kind of OP.
But you want him there as a mentor, though, and it feels like all of these movies are all about, we can't have Xavier as a mentor, we have to test ourselves. And I get that that's what you want to do with younger characters trying to strike out on their own and learn about themselves, but that's the cliched way to do that. But it does a disservice to him as a character, and you want to see him get his due, too. But I feel like he gets a lot more of that in this by having to face a failed student of his, and the parent of a failed student of his, attempting to use his powers and his creation to wipe out the entire human population. The entire mutant population. Magneto tries to wipe out the entire human population later.
Yeah.
So
I loved that secondary.
it's all just so good. All of the characters set up and everybody's motivations and the jabbing that's going on at each other. It's all really good.
Which, by the way,
the humans poke the mutants, and the mutants poke the humans, and it's just back and forth until somebody dies. It's great.
I think this is definitely the best chance that Ian McKellen got to show off as Magneto in any of these movies, too. He's fucking great in this movie. He has one of the best prison breakout sequences ever.
Yeah, and that was one moment where I thought the effects really worked, was where he was bending the metal.
Yeah, I love that, because he's got the guard, and he has that great line where he's like, there's too much iron in your blood, and then he like, kind of a Darth Vader thing with his hand, and then the dude's chest just explodes and blood sprays out, and then he extracts the iron, and it's just a fucking great scene. And then this part where he's levitating across the sort of divide there, and he's got the two little metal balls just sort of circling around him, and he's flying on like a silver surfer disc, kind of.
Yeah, no, that's great.
That's great. Whenever Magneto gets to show off in one of these movies, it's a good thing.
Oh, totally.
He definitely has the best scene in X3 as well, when he fucking moves the bridge.
That's right. I've never seen X-Men 3 in full, so that when we do that for this, it'll be my first time.
Oh boy.
It'll be my first traumatic experience with an X-Men film. Because so far my experiences have been, I really appreciate these for what they're trying to do, and I really like a lot of things about them, but I really remember this era and the limitations of it, so it definitely represents that above anything else.
Yeah, well, wait till we get to some of the more modern stuff, where they have the potential to do anything and still manage to fuck it up half the time. So
I do feel like without these, we wouldn't have the ability to just make played straight, serious Marvel movies, though. That these movies definitely started that. Where they're we've got dudes shooting lasers, and we've got demon people, and we've got we've got people using like psychic brain abilities and metal claws and human regeneration, and they just don't care. But it's such a melancholy, like, like kind of a ponderous atmosphere. But it totally works, and it totally works with that tone.
That idea, though, of the superhero movie that's played a lot more serious and dark. Actually, I would say it started a bit earlier than this with fucking Blade. But Blade also has this like weird...
That's very X-Men-y, though, and I feel like they took a lot from Blade when they made the first X-Men, especially the leather outfits.
But Blade, on the other hand, also has this very sort of campy, very Matrix-y thing going on that the X-Men movies don't really have, aside from aesthetically. So this is played even more straight than Blade. I
do definitely think that there's some Matrix scenes in this. Like there's that, like even in the martial arts bit with Nightcrawler at the beginning, I feel like there's some Matrix stuff there when he's like kicking people. There's some Matrix stuff with Mystique later when they infiltrate Alkali Lake. You know
God,
who didn't?
wait till we get to First Class and you get to see. That's probably the best example of them using the teleportation power. I think is in First Class because we have Azazel, who comic lore is Nightcrawler's dad, and he gets to do some really awesome shit in that movie.
Yeah. Nightcrawler's still cool though. Like when he teleports Storm into the fake Cerebro that's gonna kill everybody. It's a great scene. But all right, so I'm kind of spent. Like there's a lot to this movie. There's a lot more that we could kind of detail out, but all in all, it's one that's definitely worth going back to. And again, seeing the pinnacle of this period. And like I'm shitting on it a lot for having a lot of the conventions of the time and not necessarily always rising above them. But I did definitely enjoy seeing those conventions again, and I definitely felt a positive sense of nostalgia. I was just kind of like, how much of that is nostalgia and how much of that is quality filmmaking, but there's a lot of quality filmmaking to be seen in this, and it's worth watching for that alone.
I think a lot of people, if you love comic book movies, I think it's important to go back and look at some of these earlier eras of comic book movies. You know, go back to the very early stuff in the 70s and 80s. Look at your 90s era with the Batman movies that were going on then, and especially this pre-MCU 2000 superhero age when superhero movies were becoming more common, but still just didn't quite have what it took. It's you know,
but
don't just get lost.
They were starting to emotionally resonate with people, though. And this was one of the heavy hitters that really emotionally resonated with people. And it still does now. So at the very least, it definitely has that going for it. It still manages to emotionally resonate with me, certainly. And I can definitely tell you, too, 13 years later. So it definitely deserves all the credit for that as well. But yeah,
so
it's
I think
definitely.
we've probably said about everything we want to say. Again, definitely the best of the early X-Men movies, and there's a lot of debate between people who are into this franchise. There's a lot of debate whether or not even some of the newer movies have surpassed this movie. I've seen tons of is X2 better or is Days of Future Past better debates going on.
Everything always gets compared to X2, and I think that's definitely fair. This one definitely hit the mark of doing the coolest shit with these characters. You know, especially Wolverine, and just everybody gets their best go in this movie. Even characters like Rogue and maybe not so much Cyclops, but you know, he blasts some people real good.
Yeah.
He has a good cry at the end.
Again, just like Spider-Man, everything's always going to get compared back to Spider-Man 2, and for good reason. I feel like the same thing can be said about X2. And X1 to a lesser extent, because you kind of need to watch X1 to get into X2, I feel.
I disagree. I feel like this movie plays fine just on its own, just getting into it.
Yeah, but there's just some plot things that carry over, some good continuity between the two films.
Yeah, they mention quite a bit of stuff. And you know what? You won't understand the Senator Kelly thing, though.
Exactly. I think you can understand this movie okay if you watch it without seeing X1, but I think if you want to get the full effect, definitely go back and watch X1 first. It's definitely a whole lot more prototypey than this movie is.
Yeah.
But
definitely has way more pacing issues.
But I think it's a shorter movie. And
yeah, that's one thing I didn't love. I think this is way too long. It did not have to be almost 2.5 hours. I don't think it needed to be that long. There's only like 3 major set pieces, and there's so much shit in between. Not shit, but just faffing about, I feel. And pondering around. Like, I feel like we could just get to the shit. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
I didn't mention before. This is one thing that I meant to mention. I fucking love the Wolverine versus Lady Deathstrike fight.
Yeah, that's your big villain fight, and I think that it really works in a way that the X1 didn't have anything. Like, X1 had the fight between the two Wolverines in that Mystique was disguised as Wolverine, but that isn't half as cool as this is, because it's a equivalent, if not maybe even better than Wolverine, type of character going up against Wolverine. And the way Wolverine takes her out is fucking awesome.
Well, the first movie also had a little bit of Wolverine v Sabretooth, but they didn't really exploit it to its fullest extent. That's one of the few things, actually, that X-Men Origins Wolverine did right, was the relationship between Wolverine and Sabretooth, because the first movie doesn't even touch on any of that shit.
Better effects, too, because X-Men 1 has some shit wire work in it.
Yeah.
And this movie has a bit of that. The X-Men movies, I feel, have always had some really wonky wire work. I think this is the best of it, though.
Mm-hmm.
There's some really good Wolverine scenes in this. When he's running through the hallways of the X-Mansion, taking out Stryker's men, like, that's all great stuff.
It definitely looks better than Superman 4 Quest for Peace. But then again,
it definitely looks better than Superman Returns.
But, do you remember what we discussed doing in regards to the next episode, Bill? Not the next episode of DFOS, but the next time we do one of these X-Men things?
As to when or what? Because, I mean, it'll be X-Men 3.
No, but we had talked about. Okay, so I guess we had talked about doing X3 and X-Men Origins Wolverine together, because that way we can sort of get the shit out of the way and get to first class.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, that's fine. Definitely.
Yeah, so it's going to be like pulling a fucking Band-Aid, but next time we'll talk about both X3 and X-Men Origins Wolverine.
I can't believe I have to watch those together. That's going to be. I'm going to want to fucking die. I'm going to need lots of alcohol and drugs for that.
Just space them out, man. Watch one day and one the other the next day. It'll be all right.
You think I'll be able to do? Like, I'll be able to plan it out that well? You're so cute.
But we'll get it all done at once. Like I said, it's like pulling a fucking Band-Aid, and it'll allow us to ask the age-old question that has been bugging people ever since these movies came out: which is worse? So.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Hopefully, we can arrive at a conclusion on that front.
It'll
but after
be an
that,
interesting scientific experiment, a painful one though, with lots of negative consequences for all involved, just like the Manhattan Project.
But after that, it'll be pretty smooth sailing, because after that, we'll get to do First Class and the Wolverine and Days of Future Past.
I've never seen First Class. I've never seen the Wolverine, so I'm looking forward to all that, because that stuff I'm unfamiliar with, but it's apparently good. So can't wait.
And then of course Deadpool, Apocalypse, and eventually Logan. So
can't wait, man. Can't wait.
Lots of X movies to get through.
And we're not going to do it next week, but in regards to next week, we forgot to do the Godzilla Gang Christmas special on the last episode of DFOS, which we meant to do. We were going to do a commentary on that at Christmas time. So why don't we do that as part of next time? And would you also be about doing a science update next time? Because I have plenty of articles to do another one of those.
Sure, why not?
So why don't we do a commentary on that Godzilla Gang Christmas special? We'll do a bunch of science articles, and then the week after we can come back with either another review topic or a wouldn't it be interesting if, or something else. I've got a wouldn't it be interesting if that I want to pitch to you when we stop recording, but
okay,
maybe we can do that.
We've got one sort of that's already been planned.
we should do that first then. So maybe we can do that.
But that one's going to require a bit more looking into and researching on our parts. So if the one that you've got is simpler, then we can plan that one first. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, maybe. All right. Well, we'll talk about it in a minute. But so next week we'll be doing some science. We'll be doing some Godzilla Gang. It'll be mad chill, y'all. It'll be mad chill. But we hope you enjoyed this episode on X1 and X2, not X1. We did that already. So be sure to like us.
By the way, next time you listen to the sweet buttery sounds of our voices, it'll be 2017.
We will probably forget to mention it then, because it'll be a week from now. So we're sorry, but you know we're getting it out of the way now. Or we're just throwing it out there right away, preemptively. But all right, so like us on Facebook if you're so inclined. You can find those links in the description for our Facebook pages. You know, the one for SOS and the one for Odyssey. You can also follow me on Twitter at Bill_Worster. You can follow us on Facebook. Just look up our names. You can subscribe to Super DM64. That's Dylan's YouTube channel in the description. Just because why not? You know, he could use the love. And all kinds of other fun stuff.
Eventually, maybe I'll start posting there again if I ever get a laptop that isn't shit.
That would help. So. That would certainly help. But all right, kids. Until next time, I'm Bill Worster, a.k.a. Zazibar.
I'm Super Damn 64, and I just realized, Bill, because you mentioned something about it, I don't think we did an Odyssey vid this month. I guess we took Christmas off.
No, I did know that. I was gonna say it before I forgot. Yeah, we'll have to do an Odyssey episode this week or next week to get caught up again, but that's okay. I don't think anybody's gonna kill us over that. But we'll get back on track with that very soon now. So again, like the Odyssey page on Facebook, so that way you can get that as soon as it's ready. If you like that shit, so get ready. It's coming soon. But otherwise, I see nothing because it's a podcast. So good night, everyone.